I pulled Dusty to a stop and checked my GPS again. The coordinates matched exactly. We should be standing right in front of that cabin. But there was nothing here except Douglas firs and sword ferns, same as always. This doesn't make sense. I dismounted and walked to where the door should have been, my boots crunching on wet pine needles. It was right here. The cabin was right here. Sheriff Holmes stepped around a massive cedar trunk, his radio crackling with static. "Virginia, you're sure about the location?" "Dead sure." I held up my GPS unit, the screen showing our exact position. I marked it the second I got back to Dusty. "These are the coordinates." Deputy Lee emerged from behind a cluster of young hemlocks, shaking her head. Nothing on the north side either, just more trees. The mist swirled around us, thick enough that I could barely see Holmes 20 feet away. But I knew these woods. I'd hunted this section since I was 16, back when my dad first brought me out here. Every ridge, every creek, every game trail was mapped in my head better than any GPS could manage. "Maybe the coordinates got scrambled," Holmes suggested, his voice careful. "Easy thing to happen when you're shaken up." I wasn't shaken up when I marked the location. The lie came out sharper than I intended. Truth was, my hands had been trembling so bad I could barely work the GPS buttons. But the coordinates were right. They had to be. I walked the perimeter again, looking for any sign of disturbance. No foundation stones, no cleared ground, no trash or debris. The forest floor looked untouched, covered in the same thick layer of decomposing needles and moss that took decades to develop. "The smell," I said, stopping next to a rotting log. "You guys smell anything?" Holmes and Lee exchanged a look I pretended not to catch. "What kind of smell?" Lee asked. "Death. Rot. Like something had been decomposing for weeks." I breathed in deeply, but caught only the clean scent of wet earth and evergreen. It was so strong I almost threw up. "Could have been a dead deer," Holmes said. "Cougar kill, maybe. They'll drag a carcass pretty far sometimes." This wasn't a deer. I kicked at the pine needles, frustrated. And it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside that cabin, coming from... I stopped myself. They already thought I was losing it. Describing the headless corpse again wouldn't help my case. Lo was taking notes in a small pad, her pen scratching against the damp paper. "Mrs. Hughes, when you first spotted the cabin, what direction were you approaching from?" "Southeast, following that game trail." I pointed toward a faint path winding between the trees. Dusty spooked about 50 yards back, started acting nervous. That's when I first caught the smell. And the cabin was how far from the trail? Maybe 30 feet. Close enough that I should have noticed it before if it had been here. I walked over to where the front door should have been. It was old. Really old. Hand-chinked logs, shake roof. Probably built in the 30s or 40s. Holmes stepped closer, his boots squelching in the wet duff. "Virginia, I've been working this area for 20 years. Never seen any structure like that." "Well, it was here 2 hours ago." I pulled out my phone and showed him the timestamp on my 911 call. "Check the call log if you don't believe me." "I believe you called," he said quietly. "I believe you saw something that scared you. But maybe what? Maybe I'm hallucinating. Maybe I'm having some kind of breakdown." The words came out louder than I meant them to. Dusty shifted nervously at the sound, his reins trailing in the ferns where I'd dropped them. Looked up from her notepad. "Has anything like this happened before? Seeing things that weren't there?" "I didn't see things. I saw a thing. One specific thing. A cabin with a body inside." I grabbed Dusty's reins and started walking back toward the main trail. "And if you're not going to take this seriously, I'm done wasting my time." Holmes caught up with me in a few long strides. "Hey, nobody's saying you're crazy, but we've got to work with what we can find, and right now that's not much." I stopped walking and turned to face him. Glenn Holmes had been sheriff for 15 years, and I'd known him almost that long. He'd always been straight with me, never talked down to me like some of the other guys in law enforcement. But I could see the doubt in his eyes now, the careful way he was choosing his words. "You think I made it up. I think you experienced something traumatic, and sometimes my mind is fine." I swung up into the saddle, suddenly desperate to get out of these woods. "But there's a killer out there, and when someone else finds that body, don't come asking me for help." The ride back to the trailhead took 20 minutes, with Holmes and Lay following behind on foot. I could hear them talking in low voices, probably discussing my mental state and whether they needed to do some kind of welfare check. The thought made my stomach twist. At my truck, I loaded Dusty into the trailer while Holmes filled out his incident report. The whole thing felt surreal. filing paperwork about a crime scene that apparently didn't exist. "We'll keep the case open," he said, handing me a copy of the report. "If anything else turns up, we'll investigate." "What case?" "According to you, nothing happened. According to the evidence, nothing happened. But I'm not closing the door on it." He leaned against my truck's tailgate, his expression serious. "Virginia, you've been under a lot of stress lately. The promotion, the new responsibilities. Maybe you should talk to someone." "I should talk to someone about the headless corpse I found." "Yeah, I should talk to a detective who'll actually investigate it." Holmes sighed. "Go home, get some rest, we'll figure this out." But as I drove away, watching him and Led disappear in my rearview mirror, I knew they'd already figured it out. In their minds, I was the crazy lady who called in a fake murder scene. The reliable Virginia Hughes they'd known for years had just become someone they needed to handle carefully. The worst part was the tiny voice in the back of my head asking the same question they were probably asking each other. If the cabin wasn't there now, had it ever been there at all? I stared at the ceiling for the third straight hour, replaying every detail from that cabin. The way the door had creaked when I pushed it open. The metallic smell of old blood mixed with decay. The way that Headless' body had been positioned in the chair, arms hanging loose at the sides. Real. It had all been real. Angela shifted beside me, her breathing deep and even. She'd given up trying to talk me out of tomorrow's trip around midnight, after I'd snapped at her for the second time about understanding what I saw. Now she was doing that thing where she pretended to sleep when she was actually lying there worrying. I rolled over and checked my phone. 3:47 a.m. In 4 hours I'd be loading my pack into the truck, heading back to those coordinates one last time. Alone this time, without Holmes hovering behind me with that careful expression he wore when he thought someone might be losing it. The GPS unit sat on my nightstand, its screen dark. I'd checked the coordinates so many times I had them memorized. 44.2847 degrees N, 121.7734 degrees W. Same numbers every time. Same location where I'd found that cabin, and where Holmes had found nothing but trees. My phone buzzed with a text from Haley. "Still think you should wait and go with someone. These woods aren't safe alone." I deleted it without responding. Haley meant well, but she'd made her opinion clear during our phone call. Stress from the promotion. Too much responsibility too fast. Maybe I should take some time off, see someone who could help me work through whatever was happening. Everyone had a theory about my mental state. Nobody wanted to consider that maybe, just maybe, I'd actually seen what I said I'd seen. I slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen where my pack waited by the back door. 3 days of food, water purification tablets, emergency shelter, extra batteries for everything, and the digital camera I'd bought yesterday, a good one with high resolution and plenty of memory. This time I'd have proof. The coffee maker gurgled to life as I went through my gear one more time. Compass, GPS, first aid kit, knife, emergency whistle. I'd packed like I was heading into true wilderness, even though the cabin was only 2 miles from the nearest logging road. "You're really doing this?" I turned to find Angela in the doorway, wearing my old Forestry Service t-shirt and a worried expression. "I have to." "No, you don't." She moved to the coffee maker, pulling down 2 mugs. "You could let it go, file it away as one of those things that can't be explained and move on with your life." "Could you? If you'd seen what I saw." She poured coffee for both of us, her movements careful and deliberate. "I don't know, but I know what this is doing to you. To us." The words hung between us like a challenge. I'd been so focused on proving I wasn't crazy that I'd barely noticed how Angela had started walking on eggshells around me, how she'd stopped mentioning work events or weekend plans, like she was afraid to add any more stress to my life. "After tomorrow, it's done," I said, "one way or another. What if you don't find anything again?" I sipped my coffee, considering the question I'd been avoiding for a week. Then maybe everyone's right. Maybe I am losing it. Angela sat across from me at the kitchen table, wrapping her hands around her mug. "You're not losing it, but trauma can mess with memory, with perception. Finding a body like that, I know what I saw. I believe you saw something, but maybe not exactly what you remember seeing." The doubt in her voice was gentler than Holmes's, but it cut deeper. This was my wife, the person who knew me better than anyone. If she couldn't believe me, who would? "The flagging tape," I said. "Someone tore down my flagging tape. Or it blew away. Or animals got to it. All of it? Every single piece?" Angela reached across the table and took my hand. "Ginny, listen to yourself. You're talking like there's some conspiracy to hide this cabin from you. Maybe I was, but what was the alternative? That I'd hallucinated the whole thing? That my mind had conjured up a detailed crime scene complete with smells and sounds and physical sensations? I pulled my hand away and stood up. I need to get ready. Don't go alone, please. Take Haley, or ask Holmes to send someone with you. Holmes thinks I'm having a breakdown. And Haley, I shook my head. She's already planning my intervention. Because we care about you. Because you think I'm crazy. Angela's face tightened. I think you're obsessed. I think you're so determined to prove you're right that you can't see what this is doing to your health, your job, your marriage. The words hit like a slap. My marriage? When's the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about this cabin? When's the last time you came to bed before midnight, or ate a full meal, or showed any interest in anything else? I wanted to argue, but she was right. The past week had been consumed by maps and GPS coordinates and failed searches. I'd called in sick to work twice, something I'd never done unless I was actually dying. After tomorrow, I said again. Angela stood and moved to the sink, rinsing out her mug with more force than necessary. Fine, but I'm not waiting around here worrying myself sick. I'm going to my sister's for the weekend. Angela, call me when you get back. If you get back. She left the kitchen without looking at me, and a few minutes later I heard the bedroom door close. Not slam, just close with the quiet finality that was somehow worse than anger. I sat alone in the kitchen as dawn crept through the windows, drinking coffee and studying the topographical map I'd spread across the table. The area around my coordinates showed nothing but forest, same as it had for the past 50 years of surveys. No structures, no clearings, no signs of human habitation. But I'd been there. I'd seen that cabin, smelled the death inside it, touched the rough wood of the doorframe. Tomorrow I'd prove it, one way or another. I folded the map and headed upstairs to shower, trying not to think about Angela's words or the empty space in our bed where trust used to be. In 6 hours I'd be back in those woods, following my GPS to coordinates that everyone else thought led nowhere. This time would be different. This time I'd find answers. Or I'd finally accept that the person everyone was worried about was right to be worried. I pushed through the thick undergrowth on my 5th day of searching, sweat sticking my shirt to my back despite the cool morning air. The GPS showed I was close, maybe 50 yards from the coordinates. My pack felt heavier today, loaded down with the new camera and extra batteries I'd bought after Angela left for her sister's place. Then I saw it. A flash of weathered wood through a gap in the Douglas firs, exactly where my coordinates said it should be. The cabin, right there, like it had never disappeared at all. I stopped walking and just stared for a minute, my heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me had started to believe everyone else was right, that I'd imagined the whole thing, but there it was, same hand-chinked logs, same shake roof sagging with age. Something was different though. The forest around the cabin had gone completely quiet. No bird calls, no rustling in the underbrush, no insects buzzing. Even the wind had stopped moving through the trees. The silence pressed against my eardrums like I was underwater. I pulled out my camera and started taking pictures as I walked closer. The door stood wide open this time, hanging on its hinges like an invitation, or a trap. The smell was gone. That overwhelming stench of death and decay that had nearly knocked me over a week ago, nothing. Just the clean scent of pine needles and moss. I stopped at the threshold and peered inside. The chair sat in the center of the room, but the headless body had vanished. No blood on the walls, no stains on the floor. Everything looked scrubbed clean like someone had taken a pressure washer to the whole place. But there was something in the chair, a single sheet of white paper folded once. I took a dozen photos before stepping inside, my boots echoing on the wooden floor. The furniture had been moved around. The small table pushed against the far wall, a wooden crate turned on its side. Someone had definitely been here, cleaning up, rearranging things. My hands shook as I picked up the paper and unfolded it. Block letters written in black ink, neat and deliberate. Leave this place or more will die. I nearly dropped the note. More will die. That meant Thomas Mackenzie, because that's who the body had to be. The missing man Holmes had mentioned wasn't the first, and he wouldn't be the last if I kept coming back here. I photographed the note from every angle, then slipped it into a plastic evidence bag I'd brought. The camera clicked constantly as I documented everything: the clean walls, the rearranged furniture, the scrubbed floor. 63 photos by the time I was done, covering every inch of the cabin's interior and exterior. The quiet followed me the whole time. No matter how much noise I made walking around, taking pictures, moving things to check underneath, the forest stayed silent. It felt like being watched by invisible eyes, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. I spent 2 hours going through everything, looking for any trace of what had happened here. But whoever had cleaned this place knew what they were doing. No blood, no hair, no fingerprints on the surfaces I could see. Just that note and the memory of what I'd found before. When I finally left the cabin and walked back toward the tree line, the forest sounds came back all at once. Birds calling, squirrels chattering, wind moving through the branches, like someone had flipped a switch and brought the woods back to life. I didn't stop walking until I reached my truck. Holmes looked up from his paperwork when I walked into the sheriff's office, the evidence bag containing the note clutched in my hand. His expression shifted from polite concern to genuine interest when he saw what I was carrying. "You found something." "I found the cabin, and this was waiting for me." I set the bag on his desk and pulled out my camera. 63 photos of the interior and exterior. The body's gone, but someone left me a message. He studied the note through the plastic, his jaw tightening as he read the words. "When did you find this?" 2 hours ago. Same coordinates as before, cabin exactly where I said it would be. Holmes called Deputy Lee over and they both examined the photographs on my camera's display screen. I watched their faces change as they scrolled through the images. The clean interior, the rearranged furniture, the note in the chair. "This changes things," Lee said quietly. Holmes nodded and looked up at me. "Virginia, I owe you an apology. Something important happened out there, and we should have taken it more seriously from the start." The relief hit me so hard I had to sit down. After a week of everyone treating me like I was having a breakdown, finally someone believed me. "We'll run this through forensics," Holmes continued, holding up the evidence bag. "Check the handwriting against our database, see if the paper gives us any clues." "What about the missing person case, Thomas Mackenzie? 3 weeks ago. Matches your time frame and the general description of the body you saw." Holmes made a note in his file. "We'll treat this as a potential homicide investigation now." But the forensic analysis came back empty. No fingerprints on the paper. No matches for the handwriting in their system. The ink was standard black ballpoint, the paper generic copy stock you could buy anywhere. Holmes organized 3 more searches of the cabin over the next month, but they found nothing else. No additional evidence. No signs of whoever had left the note. The case gradually went cold as other investigations demanded attention and resources. I kept the photographs, though, stored on my computer and backed up in 3 different places. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that something had happened in those woods. The note was evidence that Thomas Mackenzie's death wasn't random, and that someone out there knew exactly what had happened to him. Someone who was still watching, still waiting, still willing to kill to keep their secrets buried in the forest. I pulled my truck into the parking area at Cascade Lakes and sat there for a minute, watching Haley load her gear. She moved with the same confident efficiency she'd always had, checking her rifle, adjusting her pack straps, talking excitedly about the elk sign she'd spotted last week. "You sure you don't want to come with us?" she called over. "Martinez saw a 6-point bull up near Broken Top yesterday." I shook my head and held up my clipboard. Got to finish these habitat assessments before the snow hits. It was a lie, and we both knew it. The assessments could wait another week, and Broken Top was exactly the kind of remote backcountry I used to live for. But that was before I learned that familiar forests could hide things that made no sense. Before I discovered that some mysteries were better left alone. Haley walked over to my window, her expression shifting to that careful concern I'd gotten used to over the past 3 years. "Ginny, you can't keep avoiding the good hunting spots forever." "I'm not avoiding anything, I'm working. You haven't been more than 5 miles from a main road since I found a murder victim, and nobody believed me until I had photographic evidence." I kept my voice light, but Haley's face tightened anyway. "That's not what I meant." But it was exactly what she meant. Everyone had their theories about what the Mackenzie case had done to me. Angela thought I'd developed some kind of forest phobia. Holmes figured I was being cautious after a traumatic experience. Haley believed I'd lost my nerve for real wilderness. None of them understood that it wasn't fear keeping me on the established trails. It was knowledge. The forest had shown me something that shouldn't exist, and I wasn't eager to find out what other impossible things might be waiting in the deep woods. "Have a good hunt," I said, rolling up my window. I drove the familiar route to my survey area, a section of managed forest near the highway where I'd be documenting deer browse patterns. Safe, predictable work that kept me busy and far from the coordinates that still haunted my dreams. The radio crackled as I parked at the trailhead. "Virginia, you copy? Go ahead, dispatch. Sheriff Holmes wants to know if you can swing by the office when you're done today. Says he's got something you might want to see." My stomach dropped. Holmes hadn't called me about the Mackenzie case in over a year, not since the last forensic analysis came back empty. Did he say what it was about? Negative. Just asked me to reach out. I spent the morning trying to focus on my work, measuring browse height and counting damaged saplings, but my mind kept drifting to that radio call. Holmes wouldn't contact me unless something significant had happened. Maybe they'd found new evidence. Maybe someone had come forward with information about Thomas Mackenzie, or maybe another body had turned up. By noon, I'd given up pretending to work. I packed my gear and drove straight to the sheriff's office, my hands tight on the steering wheel. Holmes looked up when I walked in, and I could see immediately that whatever he wanted to discuss was serious. He had that expression he wore during difficult conversations, the one that meant he was choosing his words carefully. "Thanks for coming in, Virginia. Have a seat." I sat across from his desk, noticing the manila folder he kept glancing at. "What's this about?" "Got a call yesterday from a detective in Bend. They've been working a missing person case that might connect to Mackenzie." He opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. Woman named Sarah Chen disappeared 6 weeks ago while hiking alone in the Deschutes National Forest. The photo showed an Asian woman in her 30s, smiling at the camera with mountains in the background. She looked healthy and confident, like someone who knew her way around the wilderness. "Experienced hiker," Holmes continued, "had all the right gear, filed a proper trip plan, knew the area well. Search and rescue spent 2 weeks looking for her before they had to call it off." "What makes you think it's connected to Mackenzie?" Holmes pulled out another document. "Her car was found at a trailhead about 15 miles from your cabin coordinates, and yesterday, a day hiker found this nailed to a tree near where she was supposed to camp." He handed me a plastic evidence bag containing a sheet of white paper, block letters in black ink, neat and deliberate. "Stay away or more will die." The words hit me like ice water. Same handwriting, same paper, same message with slight variation. Someone was still out there, still killing people who got too close to whatever secret that cabin was hiding. "Have you been back to the coordinates?" Holmes asked. "No." The answer came out sharper than I intended. "I told you 3 years ago I was done with that place." "I know. But if this is connected, if someone's using that area as a hunting ground..." He didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. How many people had disappeared in those woods over the years? How many missing hikers and hunters had been written off as accidents or people who'd simply gotten lost? "The Bend detective wants to organize a joint search," Holmes said. "Multiple agencies, full forensic team, cadaver dogs. Real investigation this time, not just a couple of deputies walking around with flashlights." I stared at the evidence bag, remembering the silence that had fallen over the forest when I'd approached the cabin that last time. The feeling of being watched by invisible eyes. When? Next week if the weather holds. I know this is a lot to ask, but we could use someone who knows the exact location, someone who's been there before. 3 years of staying safe, of keeping to the main trails and avoiding the deep woods. 3 years of pretending that what I'd found was just an isolated incident, a single murder that had been solved and filed away. But Sarah Chen's photograph stared up at me from Holmes's desk, and I knew I couldn't walk away from this. Not if there was a chance she was still alive somewhere. Not if my knowledge of those coordinates could help find her. "I'll do it," I said. Holmes nodded, relief visible on his face. "Thank you. I'll call the detective in Bend and set up a briefing." I stood to leave, then turned back. "Holmes, when you searched the cabin after I found the note, did you ever get the feeling you were being watched?" His expression grew thoughtful. "You know, now that you mention it, yeah, like something was paying attention to us the whole time. But you never saw anything, nothing concrete. Just a feeling." He paused. "Why?" "Because whoever left that note knew exactly when I'd be there. They cleaned up the scene and had the message waiting for me, like they'd been watching the whole time." "You think they're still monitoring the area?" I thought about the unnatural silence that had fallen over the forest, the way the normal sounds had returned the moment I'd walked away from the cabin. "I think they never left."